You think you know Adolf Hitler? You've never seen him like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown, much of it hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was: a notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer. As soon as Hitler gets out of prison, he re-establishes the NSDAP. After his imprisonment, he decides to take power by legal means instead of attempting a further coup. As the unquestioned leader of the NSDAP and the national camp, he develops the party into a powerful movement. The NSDAP attracts mainly young people and offers an alternative to the established bureaucratic parties. As the economy recovers in the late 1920s, the NSDAP stagnates. But with the crises at the beginning of the 1930s, Hitler's party regains popularity. Hitler loses the election for president. But in the next parliamentary elections, the NSDAP becomes the strongest party. Nevertheless, Hindenburg still refuses to appoint him chancellor. Hitler must rethink how he can come to power.
At the head of the Reich stood an imperial field marshal, as far as I knew, with ultra-conservative views and a limited intellect. The anti-republican Conservative Party, now called the German National, had occasionally participated in government. Why shouldn't this continue? Pursue further consolidation. Where were the alternatives? The communists would never come to power, certainly not the National Socialists. Doloman, student.
Diary, November the 28th, 1926. Departure Monday morning. Arrival in the afternoon in Essen. Straight to the boss. He's happy that I've come. To the auditorium. A huge hall, filled to bursting with people. Hitler comes in. Then he speaks for 2 hours. He was the Führer again, for whom it is a real pleasure to fight. Joseph Goebbels, NSDAP leader of Berlin.
After imprisonment in Landsberg, Hitler becomes the sole leader of the nationalist movement. He feels chosen by destiny to show Germany the way to national salvation. Although the party remains unsuccessful at the polls and membership increases only slowly, the personality cult around Hitler is growing. This Führer cult holds the National Socialist movement together across ideological divisions and personal differences.
The salute, Heil Hitler, also began to take hold at about this time. It originally came from the harmless greeting, Heil so-and-so, something you'd say to people in sporting or cycling clubs without using their names. Ernst Hanfstaengl, Hitler acquaintance.
Letter from Marga to Heinrich Himmler, March the 2nd, 1928. Dear sweetheart, earlier on I tried to imagine how you looked as a boy. Do you have any pictures? Why are you going to a Hitler meeting? You know what he has to say. Sweetheart, I kiss you, your little wife.
Gregor Strasser in Dresden, 1929. The druggist Gregor Strasser has been the Reich Organization Director of the NSDAP since 1928, and thus the party's second most important man. In the north of the German Reich, he ensures a rise in popularity for the NSDAP, but he is a socialist revolutionary and committed to cooperating with the Soviet Union, and thus comes more and more into conflict with Hitler. Since 1925, Strasser has sponsored his secretary, the young Heinrich Himmler. At Hitler's behest, Himmler will have Strasser murdered by the SS on June the 30th, 1934. The German Interior Ministry states in March 1927 that the NSDAP is not moving forward.
It did not succeed in bringing its supporters even close to the strength that it reached in the year 1923.
Hitler had failed to reach the middle class himself. Now, when the middle class fell with the Mark and were later exasperated by the world crisis, he offered himself as their savior. Depressed, they wanted dreams. He offered them dreams for the moment and security for the future. He made them fight, and they made him a god, the god of the petty bourgeois, precisely because he thought and spoke what was inarticulate in their minds. Stephen H. Roberts, Australian historian who lived in Germany during the 1920s.
In 1928, Hitler rents a small house on the Obersalzberg, known as Haus Wachenfeld. He used to stay here under the name Herr Wolf. Hitler allows his closest friends to call him Wolf.
The reason for this? Hitler went by the nickname Wolf at the beginning of his political career. Heinrich Hoffmann, friend of Adolf Hitler.
Hitler understands the name as the Germanic root of Adolf. It corresponds to his view of the world as a place of constant struggle for survival. To Hitler, the name Wolf implies the idea of strength, aggression, and solitude.
Wieland, Wolfgang, Verena and I, we all loved Wolf, because he enthralled us with his adventure stories about his travels through Germany. For us, his life was exciting because it was so different. Everything was like a fairy tale. Fridolin Wagner, granddaughter of Richard Wagner.
Soon, Hitler has enough money to buy Haus Wachenfeld. From 1924 onwards, the German economy recovers. This leads to the 5 golden years of the Weimar Republic.
Looking back on it now, I see the mad whirl of this Berlin of 1928 and 29 as a kind of Pompeian revel on the eve of the Vesuvian eruption. Sefton Delmer, correspondent of the Daily Express in Berlin.
Diary, September the 19th, 1928. Elsa wrote that she has had her hair cut in a bob. I am shocked, would never have thought it possible. But one shouldn't be surprised at anything nowadays. Diary, October the 3rd, 1928. Yesterday, Elsa visited, cheery and gay. Her bob suits her extremely well. Nevertheless, to me it looks awful and will remain so. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
The Nazis hated culture itself because it is essentially international and therefore subversive of nationalism. Christopher Isherwood, British-American writer.
1920s, Berlin was ahead of everything that was known as new in our field. It had everything. Reinhardt's great theatre, great film studios, great films. The most beautiful bars and restaurants, including gay bars. Berlin was productive and rich with ideas, rich in ideals, and at the same time practical, a combination never achieved before. Marlene Dietrich, actress and singer, memoirs.
If Maestro Klemperer takes the tempi differently than Furtwängler, if a painter adds to a dusker hue, which one cannot even in bright daylight perceive in Pomerania, if one is for birth control, if one builds a house with a flat roof, this is all cultural Bolshevism, as is showing a cesarean section in a film. Cultural Bolshevism is practiced by the actor Chaplin, and if the physicist Einstein asserts that the principle of a constant speed of light can only be invoked where there is no gravity, this must also be cultural Bolshevism, and a personal favor to Mr. Stalin. Karl von Ossietzky, publisher of the Weltbühne magazine.
Art was no longer a mere ornament of life, but rather its immediate expression. Cubism, futurism, expressionism, whatever you want to call it, this is how we were. This was our world, so shaken and shocked that everything was upside down. Surrealism? Of course, what else? Vicky Baum, writer and journalist.
I met Hitler personally for the first time in early October 1927. He was accompanied by Rudolf Hess. In the hotel, Hitler immediately went to his room. Hess followed him quickly after ordering 20 bottles of mineral water for the lectern on the grounds that Hitler sweated a great deal during the big speeches, and he was liable to lose 5 pounds in weight. Albert Krebs, provincial NSDAP leader, Hamburg.
Ihre ganzen Hoheit und widerspruchsvollen Bauern versprechen die Nationalsozialisten.
The old Social Democratic People's Party had almost no orators able to mobilize the masses. While the National Socialist speakers whipped their followers into a frenzy, the Social Democrats tormented their listeners with figures, statistics, and evidence. Julius Leber, editor-in-chief, Social Democratic Lübecker Volksboten newspaper.
Geheimbefehl für den Tag des Umsturzes. Durch Fleiß, durch Lernen und ich kann sagen durch Hungern. Langsam durch den Versailler Vertrag planmäßig eingeleitete Gespenst des asiatischen Bolschewismus. Und ich dachte damals, wenn es größere Erkenntnis tun überwinden.
On November the 16th, 1928, for the first time after the ban on public speaking in Prussia has been lifted, Hitler speaks in the Sportpalast in Berlin, allegedly in front of 18,000 supporters. For the first time, he uses an electroacoustic sound system, speaking into a microphone. And for the first time, his words are clearly understood in every corner of a large space.
Sieg oder Niederlage, der Mittelstand verelendet, die Finanzen. Also ist es typisch deutsch, 30 Parteien zu besitzen.
Between 1925 and 1929, Hitler's small political movement is marked by activism, dynamism, enthusiasm, youthfulness and strength. Nearly 60% of new party members are under 30 years old. The Reich banner, black, red, gold, a League of German War Veterans and Republicans, was founded 1924 in Magdeburg. In 1932, the banner has more than 3 million members.
At first, people laughed at the parades, the meetings full of incidents and brawl. But it soon became clear that neither the underlying ideology nor the wild determination of his representatives had been correctly estimated. The workers' movement mobilized its forces, increased the supporters' activity, and created defenses in the form of the Reich banner black, red, gold, the Iron Front, and special protective formations called Schufels. I was one of the younger driving forces and very committed to all of this. Wilhelm Matthau, Social Democrat, Königsberg.
There was only one way for us to save the Republic: to unite with the left-wing parts of the Democratic Party and the Centre Party and find a common approach. Due to the authoritarianism of the state, it would have been impossible for the Social Democratic Party to establish a purely party political military organization for the protection of the Republic and the working class against fascism. Karl Höltermann, Vice President, Reich banner black, red, gold.
By the way, you could buy a pistol, a 7.65 caliber, factory new, for a giveaway price. A putsch was more or less expected any day. The air was full of such rumors. Horst Wessel, law student in Berlin.
And of course we gave ourselves military training, but not in order to overthrow the state, but to defend ourselves. Police and fascist thugs kept attacking demonstrations and disrupting meetings. We had the Red Front Fighter League and the Red Youth Front. In the evening, we practiced judo on the banks of the River Elbe and learned how to move around in groups safely and unobtrusively at night. We never sought or provoked brawls. We just defended ourselves against raids and often got beaten up. Horst Zindermann, communist youth official, Dresden, before daylight.
Street processions, press promotions, propaganda tours into the provinces created an atmosphere of activism and tension. There were countless clashes and wounded people, even dead people, left in the square. Horst Wessel, autobiography.
In February 1930, one of the casualties will be the Berlin student Horst Wessel. In parliamentary elections on May the 20th, 1928, the Social Democrat SPD and the Communist KPD win 40% of the votes at the expense of the nationalist parties. The NSDAP earns only 2.6% of the votes and 12 seats. In 1930, the NSDAP bought new premises, the Brown House, near Königsplatz. The money for the purchase is donated to the NSDAP by industrialist Fritz Thyssen. Hitler will have Thyssen arrested and jailed at the end of 1940.
For his study, Hitler had a large corner room on the first floor, which I can barely remember because I seldom saw him there. Not even the large Fridericus Rex painting on the wall could persuade him to keep regular working hours or treat appointments as binding. Ernst Hanfstengel.
Despite the lack of political success, the party stages spectacular rallies, first in Munich and Weimar, then from 1927 onwards, exclusively in Nuremberg.
Diary, Nuremberg, August the 4th, 1929. A stampede of people that exceeds our wildest hopes. Outside, the drums are already booming. Torchlight processions, endlessly long. Joseph Goebbels, NSDAP leader of Berlin.
The party conventions are, without question, Hitler's personal work. Just as he was involved in building the SA, from the smallest details of the uniforms to the color of the collar patches, he concerned himself with the planning of the party conventions, right down to the decorations in the Congress Hall. Albert Krebs, NSDAP leader, Hamburg.
Through the city, a triumphant procession. Everyone cheering and throwing flowers. March past, almost 4 hours. A sea of joy and flowers. Joseph Goebbels.
The continuing fragmentation of the party landscape is advantageous for the rise of the NSDAP. In elections, they win more and more support from the splinter and protest parties.
October 1929. Angry autumn after a beautiful summer. Rain and calm weather, and something suffocating in the air. And it wasn't the weather. For the first time on the street, manure-brown uniforms. Sebastian Hafner, journalist, memoirs.
The SPD had won the parliamentary elections of 1928, and since then led a coalition government with the middle-class parties. This falls apart over domestic policies 1 year after the death of the Liberal Foreign Minister Stresemann. The fall of the SPD Chancellor Hermann Müller and the appointment of the Central Party's Heinrich Brüning are the first steps towards the abandonment of the Weimar Republic by the founding parties.
National Socialists were now sitting in Parliament. The rise of the party could no longer be overlooked. Ernst Niekisch, National Bolshevist, Hitler opponent.
In foreign policy, Hitler promised to free the country from the injustices of the Versailles Treaty. Domestically, he promised to eliminate unemployment and political squabbling. Heinz Guderian, Colonel of the German Army.
In 1930, Chancellor Brüning convinces President von Hindenburg to dissolve Parliament and call for new elections 24 months early. Brüning is determined to govern with the help of the President, if necessary without a majority, by presidential decree. Following the example of Italy, at the end of the 1920s, movements which are called fascist are gaining strength all over Europe. In some Eastern European states, dictatorial governments rely on the support of such factions. A union of fascists is also established in the UK, a party demonstration in Manchester in 1934.
In 1930, unemployment had increased to 3,076,000, and the National Socialists then increased their MPs to 108, with a vote of 18%. Less than 3 years later, the National Socialist Party came to power. Unemployment had risen to 6,014,000. Sir Oswald Mosley, born 1896, founder, British Union of Fascists.
Diary, September the 15th, 1930, the first election results. Fantastic. The bourgeois parties are smashed. Up to now, we have 103 seats, a tenfold increase. Joseph Goebbels.
The day after the election, the composition and climate of politics in Germany have changed fundamentally. The NSDAP has risen from a Bavarian political sect to become the second biggest party, fundamentally opposed to the democracy of the Weimar Republic. The Social Democrats suffer only minor losses, mostly to the Communists. Catholic voters link up effectively with the Catholic Centre Party. They lose only a few votes.
After the lost election, you sensed for the first time strong displeasure with the party leadership from within the Social Democratic ranks. A deep-seated disillusionment with the bigwigs came over the Social Democratic organization. Julius Leber, SPD member of the Reichstag.
The electoral gains of the NSDAP are greatest in the predominantly Protestant regions of rural northern and eastern Germany. Some 3/4 of the voters are Protestant. The middle class is overrepresented with 40%. Yet the NSDAP is not a purely middle-class party. The Hitler movement, as the party is called by friend and foe, finds favor among all sectors of society, including industrial workers.
I went to a Nazi rally. It was held in a beer hall. Some drank beer, the others sat in front of empty tables. There were a lot of workers there. That hurt terribly. Ilya Ehrenburg, Russian Jewish author.
Nothing succeeds like success, as they say in English.
Stefan Heim, student in Berlin.
Diary, November the 12th, 1930. Röhm arrives from Bolivia, where he was active in the army. He's very nice to me, and I like him a lot. An open, straight soldier type. Joseph Goebbels.
The years from 1931 to 1935, apart from my anxiety on public affairs, were personally very pleasant to me. I earned my livelihood. I meditated constantly upon the European situation and the rearming of Germany. Winston Churchill, the Second World War.
New Year's Order, December the 31st, 1931. The army of brown shirts has multiplied numerous times. The movement has suffered a great deal of blood sacrifice. Comrades, at the beginning of this year, I thank you for everything that you accomplished over the past year through dedicated work and self-sacrificing battles. You can enter the new year with joyful confidence, proud of what you achieved in the year 1931. Adolf Hitler.
Hitler sent a really good New Year's message to the Nazis. The world will sit up and take notice. The communists will have to watch out. Henrietta Schneider, Diary.
Speech to the Industrial Club of Düsseldorf, January the 26th, 1932. Summary. I see two principles ruggedly opposed to each other. The principle of democracy, which is the principle of destruction wherever it is practiced, and the principle of the authority of the personality, that I would describe as the principle of achievement. Adolf Hitler.
The upper class is getting closer to Hitler. My grandfather had the right saying for these turncoats. You spit in their eyes and they ask you if it's raining. Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist, diary.
Diary, Tuesday, February the 23rd, 1932. After coffee, Frau Knispel appeared with the news that Hitler is standing for the German presidential elections. Henrietta Schneider.
After an internal party discussion in Munich on February the 2nd, Adolf Hitler decides to run in the first round of voting in the German presidential elections of March 1932. One problem with his candidacy is that Hitler is not a citizen of the German Reich, which doesn't award citizenships of its own until 1934. Whoever has or gains citizenship of one of the 24 German states is a citizen of the Reich. Thus, Thomas Mann, for instance, has citizenship of the free Hanseatic city of Lübeck and a corresponding passport.
By law, Hitler was stateless because bureaucratic chicanery on the one hand and personal negligence on the other had repeatedly delayed his proper naturalization. Now, however, settling this question was merely a formality once it had become possible for the Brunswick provincial government, made up of Nazis and German nationals, to arrange automatic German citizenship for him at any time by means of a pro forma appointment to some position in the civil service. Ernst Hampstengel, head of the NSDAP Foreign Press Bureau.
In the states of the German Reich, a civil servant automatically becomes a citizen and thus a German national. This also happened to the Swiss Albert Einstein, against his will, who had become a Prussian official in 1917.
Hitler was entrusted with doing the job of a clerk for economic affairs of the state of Brunswick at the Brunswick Embassy in Berlin, an office he never held. It is thus all the more surprising that Adolf Hitler nevertheless re-registered his official place of abode as Brunswick. After all, for 1.5 years, Adolf Hitler appeared in the official list of inhabitants of Brunswick and deregistered on September the 16th, 1933 as Reich Chancellor, Berlin, Wilhelmstrasse. Hartmann Lauterbacher, provincial leader of the Hitler Youth South Hanover, Brunswick.
Berlin, this 26th day of February 1932, at the Brunswick Embassy. Today, Adolf Hitler appeared before me, who, according to the decree of the chairman of the Brunswick State Ministry and the Brunswick Minister of Finance of February the 25th, 1932, is now present as a senior civil servant employed by the state of Brunswick. After being informed of the requirements, he took the mandatory oath of service.
I swear loyalty to the Constitution of the Reich and the State, obedience to the laws and conscientious fulfillment of my duties. Adolf Hitler.
Read aloud and signed, Adolf Hitler, Senior Civil Servant.
Letter to the Embassy of Braunschweig in Berlin, February the 28th, 1932. Reference, leave. I hereby request you to grant me leave until the end of the presidential election campaign. Respectfully yours, Adolf Hitler.
When I landed in Munich on a day in March, I was told, Herr Hitler has rung from the Brown House. He's planning to fly to various cities in the Reich, and he wants to rent a plane. You have been recommended to him. During the election campaign, he wanted to travel by plane and visit up to 5 cities in one evening. Hitler told me that, frankly, he had little confidence in flying. He saw the flights as a necessary evil. And so it was that in 1932, 3 major election flights were made. Hans Bauer, Lufthansa pilot, I flew the powerful of the world.
Diary, Berlin, February the 16th, 1932. What a strange country in which the presidency must be decided between Thälmann, Hitler or Hindenburg. Thea Sternheim, art collector and author.
Hindenburg was meant to serve as a shield against Hitler's rise. That was also the reason why the Social Democrats supported his re-election in 1932. Paul Löbe, Social Democrat, President of the Reichstag.
Again, it was the politics of toleration when the SPD asked its voters to vote for Hindenburg, and how faithfully they followed. Golo Mann, Memoirs and Thoughts.
Diary, Monday, February the 29th, 1932. Who will win? Henrietta Schneider.
Election campaign flight, April 1932. Soon Hitler had sunk into morose apathy. He just sat there, staring gloomily out of the window, wads of cotton in his ears. A complete contrast to the glad-hand extrovert man at Tempelhof. Sefton Delmer, British correspondent of the Daily Express in Berlin.
We must have visited each of the major cities once, if not several times. And afterwards it was always claimed that Hitler was the first German politician to come to power who knew the country inside and out. Ernst Hanfstaengl.
As the door of the aircraft was flung open, Hitler ducked out and immediately threw himself into his Führer pose. There he stood, bareheaded, upright and unsmiling, his hand raised in greeting. Sefton Delmer.
It was always the same routine. He gave his presentation, had his bags packed, and on to the next city. Ernst Hanfstaengl.
He gave 4 or 5 speeches a day and flew from one rally to another. It was one of the few times that I heard him speak in public. We were led up to the podium. We tried hard to stay awake until the Führer's plane arrived late. Minutes later, he began his speech. He was hoarse and his jarring voice was emotionally charged and swept over the audience like a storm that takes one's breath away and leaves people excited. Fridolin Wagner.
Diary, Weimar, April the 10th, 1932, Sunday. Second round of voting in German presidential election. Hindenburg finally elected over Hitler.
Harry Graf Kessler, publicist and diplomat.
When the victory of a tired, senile, not overly bright old soldier like Hindenburg over an obnoxious, hysterical social climber is the best that we can get, it's good night, Germany. Vicky Baum, writer.
Letter, April the 20th, 1932.
My dear Mr. Hitler,
for your birthday, we are sending you our best wishes from our warm children's hearts.
When we told our parents that it was a pity we couldn't do anything for you because we're only 10 and 5 years old,
our parents said you can pray for Adolf Hitler every day, and we'll be doing that every evening.
Our prayer will be as follows.
O God, may your blessing accompany Adolf Hitler wherever he goes.
Give him the strength to free the fatherland, seen with a strong, good hand.
Your faithful little Nazis, Leonora and
Erhard L. Hamburg.
I myself have no instinct for the character expressed in faces. For a long time, I have had a not very pleasant, yet not strongly unpleasant impression of Hitler in photographs. Ludwig Quidder, German Nobel Peace Prize laureate, 1927.
Berlin, November the 8th, 1931. Nothing smells more penetratingly than the nationally scented petit bourgeois. Everything is falling apart. Where are we heading? Ter Sternheim.
More than the Nazis, the communists hate the Social Democrats, whom they defame as social fascists. With what they call a Leninist strategy, they want to make the Weimar Republic ungovernable and create conditions for a revolution through the collapse of the capitalist system.
Diary, May the 31st, 1932. Lotte is coming on Sunday. She's planning a trip with Karl to Westerland. Yesterday, Brüning resigned. Now what? Henriette Schneider.
Open letter to Theodor Leipart, German Trade Union Confederation.
Ernst Thälmann, Communist Party of Germany. Otto Wels, Social Democratic Party of Germany.
We, the undersigned, observe the development of political events with the impression that we are approaching a dreadful threat of fascisation.
In our view, this danger can be eliminated by the merger of the two major workers' parties in the election campaign. The responsibility lies with the leaders. Only the obvious desire of the workers to stand together should be decisive. Albert Einstein, Heinrich Mann, Käthe Kollwitz.
The hero of Tannenberg, the hero of the German Republic, had a dull spirit, our grumpy field marshal with his robust conscience. With truly Germanic blind loyalty, he betrayed the pious chancellor to whom he owed his power. Brüning was fired. His successor, the comparatively liberal General von Schleicher, was soon the target of wild intrigue. Klaus Mann, son of Katja and Thomas Mann.
In June 1932, Franz von Papen, on behalf of Reich President von Hindenburg, forms a right-wing conservative cabinet, which is without a majority in parliament. The new chancellor hopes for the support of Hitler and, according to Hitler's demand, asks the Reich President to call new parliamentary elections on July the 31st.
For far too long, we had been content with laughing and joking about the house painter Hitler. Karl Mayr, German-Austrian dramatist.
Diary, Sunday, July the 31st, 1932. The hatred of the parties is awful. At 10 o'clock, the elections begin, without Wilhelm. He is plagued with neuralgia. Henriette Schneider.
The triumph of the National Socialists in the July elections of 1932 is a Pyrrhic victory, although all forms of propaganda have been exhausted, leaving the party deeply in debt. They have barely increased their vote over the elections of the spring.
In a large portion of the remote villages, Hitler had the absolute majority in the parliamentary elections in July, often even 2/3 of the votes. How does one account for their success? The Nazis came into the villages, ranted and raved and promised them the moon. Maria Leitner, German-speaking Hungarian journalist and communist.
Diary, August the 1st, 1932. Election results. We have gained a little ground. Marxism has gained a great deal. Now we have to seize power and wipe out Marxism. Either way, Hitler is also of this opinion. We won't get an absolute majority this way. Joseph Goebbels.
Hitler rejects Chancellor von Papen's offer to serve as Vice-Chancellor in his government and demands the office of Chancellor itself. President von Hindenburg refuses to grant Hitler governmental power and warns that all acts of terror will be dealt with severely. As almost all the major parties in the Reichstag want to bring down von Papen's government, Reich President von Hindenburg dissolves the newly elected parliament in September and calls new elections on November the 6th, 1932.
Diary, Wednesday, September the 21st, 1932. I'm following political developments in a state of pleasant titillation and yet numbness. I literally have no sympathy for any of those now wrestling with each other. Viktor Klemperer, Professor of Romance Studies, Dresden.
Diary, Friday, October the 21st, 1932. Lotte announced that she had seen Adolf and that she really liked him. Lore also heard him, but didn't see him well. She couldn't afford an expensive 5-mark seat. Henrietta Schneider.
As my wife and I had voted for the German National Party in July 1932. After some hesitation, we voted for Hitler in the elections of November the 6th the same year. So we too succumbed to the fallacy that a government takeover by the NSDAP would stabilize political and economic conditions. Alexander, Count of Donau-Schlobitten, East Prussian landowner.
Diary, November the 6th, 1932. Complied with compulsory voting, but still Social Democrat. Election results on the radio. The Nazis have lost. The KPD have gained. Klaus Mann, writer.
In the German elections of November 1932, the NSDAP won 11.75 million votes, the SPD 7.25 million, and the KPD some 6 million. So together, both workers' parties were a lot stronger than the Nazis. Mannes Sperber, Austrian writer and KPD member at the time.
In the state elections in Thuringia in December, the NSDAP even loses 40% of its votes. Many unemployed people turn their backs on the Nazis. They now put their hopes in the communists and the German nationals.
Many leftists believed that Hitler would never recover from this setback and had ceased to be a menace. Christopher Isherwood, British-American writer.
Despite knowing better, left-wing intellectuals continued to enjoy their feeling of steady advancement. Their poems and songs, their satirical and political plays and cabaret pieces, their articles, their books and polemics, all of this resonated so strongly that for them it was as if they were standing at the loom of time. Mannes Sperber.
Hitler doesn't win the election after achieving a majority, but despite losing votes in the parliamentary elections of November. He needs the support of reactionary allies in high places. They believe that with Hitler's help, they can eliminate the communists and social democrats. These forces succeed in a few short weeks in bringing the German president around, who, thanks to the Constitution, is very powerful.
Snow was already falling heavily, and the shop windows were festively decorated. It was hard to get through the crowds thronging the sumptuously bedecked department stores. The new General Chancellor did not dissolve the Reichstag at all. So, thank God, there were no new elections. The people were allowed to celebrate Christmas and New Year's Eve in peace. There was knee-high snow in the streets, and the rush of the hungry unemployed to do the work of removing the snow was so strong that there weren't enough shovels to go round. Oscar Maria Graf, writer, from my life.
January the 1st, 1933. Hitler was in a good mood that evening and talkative, like in the old days. Before he left, he added to his entry in the guest book,
"On the first day of the new year."
Then he looked at me and said, with suppressed excitement,
"This year belongs to us."
Ernst Hanfstengel, head of the NSDAP Foreign Press Bureau.
The party had overshot its peak and was immensely in debt. According to Otto Strasser, it was some 11 million marks. Theodor Duesterberg, leader of the Stahlhelm Soldiers Association.
After Hindenburg had decided against Chancellor Brüning, the president turned his attention to the forces of the great agrarian heavy industry coalition that operated with Hitler against Brüning, his natural allies. He took their view of Hitler. The reconstruction and further expansion of the great agrarian and heavy industry positions of power was to be taken forward. But the power was not to be transferred to the National Socialism. Ernst Niekisch, journalist, National Bolshevist.
Diary, Monday, January the 30th, 1933. Elsa came back from school with the cry, "Heil Hitler!" Then we knew Hitler had become German Chancellor, at last. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
On January the 30th, 1933, Hindenburg appointed Hitler Chancellor. Meissner, Hindenburg's Secretary of State, and Papen, his confidential advisor, persuaded the old man that the crowning glory of his life work would be a unified, well-ordered Reich with military strength. He believed them. Erich Koch-Weser, liberal German politician in exile in Brasilia.
Letter of appointment. In the name of the Reich, I appoint Herr Adolf Hitler to be German Chancellor. Berlin, January the 30th, 1933. President von Hindenburg.
Letter to Paul von Hindenburg. When the history of the German people is finally written, then the end of the Reich presidency will be described as the darkest day in German history. Erich Ludendorff, Major General.
I am 19, have a little daughter, and am lying in a clinic in Munich. Suddenly I hear music, singing, shouting. A distant, disturbing noise from the streets. The night nurse comes and turns on the blue light. "Sister Maria, what's going on outside?" Maria answers, "That nice Mr. Hitler, who visited you, has become Chancellor. We put his roses very close to the Madonna in the baptistry. Mother Superior prays for him. We all pray for him and for Germany." Henrietta von Schirach, wife of Baldur von Schirach.
Diary, Tuesday, January 31st, 1933. In Berlin, there was a lot of cheering during the night. The crowd moved past Hindenburg for 3.5 hours. A huge torchlight procession. Henrietta Schneider.
This Dr. Goebbels is a wizard, Hitler said to me. Where did he get so many torches in such a short time?
Heinrich Hoffmann, photographer.
A fragment of film developed with an early AGFA colour film process. It shows thousands of extras recreating the torchlight procession through the Brandenburg Gate. It's supposed to remind viewers of January the 30th, 1933. Hitler doesn't seize power, nor is it transferred to him. Hitler obtains sole power through lies and continued broken promises to other parties. He swears to uphold the Weimar Constitution and to comply with the Articles. He deceives the mighty German president, the elites who are now collaborating with him, the voters, and the world community.
Our fanatical belief in victory had to wear down our opponents over time. We marched triumphantly through the Brandenburg Gate and will one day go down in history as the pioneers and heralds of a new, better era. Gustav Heinz, Berlin essay man.
That the Nazis are enemies for everything dear to me, I was not for a moment mistaken about that. Where I was completely mistaken was how terrible an enemy they would become. Sebastian Hafner, journalist, Memoirs.
Radio address, February the 1st, 1933. Now, German nation, give us 4 years, then you can judge and sentence us.
Adolf Hitler, Reich Chancellor.
Diary, Friday, February the 3rd, 1933. Red terror is everywhere. You can't get used to Hitler. Henrietta Schneider.
The majority of his ministers were members of the German National People's Party. He utterly despised the party and was convinced that he would one day be able to rid himself of them. To be able to carry this out, he set one condition to which the German president also agreed. He wanted the power to order new elections. Ernst Niekisch.
The election campaign was horrible. Hitler worked harder than before or at any time in the future. He knew that he needed a majority in the new assembly once and for all. The big speech in the Sportpalast on the radio was the high point of the campaign. It was ghastly. Golo Mann, Memoirs and Thoughts.
Speech in the Berlin Sportpalast, February the 10th, 1933. I cannot divest myself of my faith in my people and stand firmly by the conviction that the hour will come at last when the millions who curse us today will stand by us, and with us will hail the new, hard-won and painfully acquired German nation that we have created together, the new German Reich of greatness and power and glory and justice. Amen.
Adolf Hitler, Reich Chancellor.
Diary, Wednesday, March the 1st, 1933. It was announced on the radio yesterday that the Reichstag building was on fire. A Dutch communist has confessed. Henrietta Schneider.
At first, I didn't think that it was the communists either. But later, when I met the men who must have known, I never managed to find out who was really behind this. Fritz Wiedemann, war comrade, later adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
Edgar? Schläfst du früh?
I had decided to finish my last film, The Burning Secret, from a book by Stefan Zweig, and then go to France. The premiere of the film had the misfortune of being on the same day as the Reichstag fire. Everyone in Berlin was laughing about this coincidence. I had to leave because the SA was after me. Robert Seldmack, German Jewish film director.
Mutti? Mutti?
Saturday, March the 4th, 1933, the Führer's aircraft Richthofen lands at Devaux Airport in Königsberg. Winter still has East Prussia in its grip. Despite the bitter cold, the SA have mustered for the reception. The Chancellor Adolf Hitler will give a speech in Königsberg today and is accompanied by a large entourage, including a Hohenzollern prince. August Wilhelm, known as Auvi, is the fourth eldest son of the exiled emperor and an ardent Hitler supporter. Hitler's speech is broadcast on all stations. This coming Sunday is the Reichstag election. The Reichstag elections of March the 5th are the last more or less free elections in the German Reich. On the streets, dissidents are terrorized by the SA.
Diary, Leipzig, March the 5th, 1933. In the evening with father to Auerbach's Keller restaurant to hear the election results. The National Socialists are still far from an absolute majority. Together with the traitors of the Black-White-Red Party Alliance, at 51.8%, they have a slight majority. Erich Ebermeier, writer.
The terror that was felt everywhere interfered, of course, with free elections, but it influenced the results only slightly. Mannes Sperber, member of the Communist Party KPD.
In the elections, the NSDAP profits from the high turnout of 88.8%, gaining 43.9%. It has to form a coalition with the German National People's Party. The additional votes come mostly from former non-voters. The NSDAP also profits where it is already strong, among young Protestant voters, farmers and farm workers, the self-employed, civil servants, and the lower middle class. In the industrial segment, where the workers are often organized in unions, there is again no decisive breakthrough for the NSDAP. But on March the 5th, 1933, probably 1/3 of the workers vote for the Nazis.
Diary, March the 6th, 1933. Monday. The Nazis and the National People's Party do not have the 2/3 majority necessary to change the constitution. Graf Kessler, publicist and diplomat.
But the majority of Germans don't want a parliamentary democracy either. The democratic parties remain clearly in the minority, because 12.3% of the voters cast their votes for the communists.
The political parties, including the Social Democrats and the unions, haven't shown any overwhelming evidence of prudence and courage in recent weeks. Paul Löbe, Social Democrat, Vice President of the German Parliament.
Diary, March the 10th, 1933. Every day, the newspapers have new reports on Hitler's rise to power. The higher-up civil servants are losing their cushy positions, much to our delight. Germany is being swept clean. The communists will soon have disappeared from sight. That is Hitler's goal. Henrietta Schneider.
After the elections, the weather suddenly turned mild. The porter's wife called it Hitler weather. The street itself, like all others, was hung with black, white and red swastika flags. It was unwise not to display them. Christopher Isherwood, British writer.
March the 12th, 1933. Press dispatch. The office of the Reichstag sent the newly elected members an invitation to the opening session. According to a directive, the communist members of the assembly were not sent an invitation. Vossische Zeitung newspaper.
Diary, Tuesday, March the 21st, 1933.
Around 12, on the radio, we heard the celebrations for the opening of the Reichstag and the Garrison Church in Potsdam. You have to say they really know how to do pomp and propaganda. Karl Windschild, retired pastor.
Company followed company. The city of Potsdam stood like an iron fortress in army grey from the Old Market to the Garrison Church. Across from us were the SA, the SS, and the Stahlhelm, the League of Front Soldiers. The Reich government walked with measured steps past the Guard of Honor to the Garrison Church. Chancellor Adolf Hitler led the way, followed by Vice-Chancellor von Papen. After the president had passed the honor guard, the government and the new parliamentarians, with the exception of the communists and social democrats, entered the Garrison Church. Wilhelm Ernst Bierstedt, Grenadier, First Class, report.
In Munich, we listened to events on the radio. Potsdam, a well-disguised fraud with the aim of doing the conservatives a favor with no basis in reality. Hitler in frock coat and top hat, mild as never before or since. The voice of Hindenburg dull, as if from the grave. The Prussian sense of duty means patriotism and the fear of God. And a clear majority in Parliament once again, strictly in the spirit of the Constitution on which he took his oath. It was his last speech of significance and, without knowing it, his abdication. Now he was no longer needed. Goloman, student.
Diary, March the 25th, 1933. The Reichstag session the day before yesterday must have been terrible. The representatives had to walk through a regiment of SA people flanking the path to the chamber, a most unpleasant gauntlet. Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist.
Two days later, I was sitting in the Kroll Opera House. Not as a Reichstag deputy, I was an observer, and on March the 23rd, 1933, I witnessed the Reichstag session in which the Enabling Act was passed by 441 votes to 94. Arthur Axmann, member of the leadership of the Hitler Youth.
Und der sich mit ihm verbrüdenden anderen Organisationen ändert dies nichts.
The debate in the Reichstag should have begun with a sharply worded protest against this blatant breach of the Constitution, through which more than 80 fully legitimate communist members of the Reichstag were excluded. All parties remained silent, including the Social Democrats, who accepted this constitutional breach. The Social Democrats did at least reject the Enabling Act, in contrast to the Centre Party, the Bavarian People's Party, and the State Party. Ludwig Quidde, German Nobel Peace Prize laureate, 1927.
With the so-called Enabling Act, Hitler demands extraordinary powers for himself and his government, thus paving the way for a dictatorship.
Otto Wels's speech was a masterpiece of style and content, a final farewell to the faded era of humanity. Wilhelm Högner, SPD Member of Parliament, Memoirs.
The Social Democrats were the only members to vote against the Enabling Act. But despite my conviction that the Social Democrats had failed, I was not unimpressed by Wels' speech. Arthur Axmann.
Article 1 of the Act describes the transfer of legislative powers from Parliament to the Cabinet. The legislative and executive branches become one. Parliament has virtually abolished itself.
Meine Herren, seit dem 30. Januar
hat sich in Deutschland eine Umwälzung vollzogen, die in unserer Geschichte einst mit Recht als die nationale Revolution bezeichnet werden wird. Dass ein solcher geschichtlicher Vorgang, wie jede Kampfhandlung, hier und da auch von bedauerlichen Erscheinungen begleitet ist, liegt auf der Hand.
He overrode the Constitution with the Constitution, and thus won the fight for unlimited power in the first and decisive round. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, Finance Minister.
The present state of affairs in Germany causes me to resign my position in the Prussian Academy of Sciences. I know how deeply I'm indebted to it. The dependency of my position on the Prussian government is intolerable under the present circumstances. With respect, Albert Einstein.
10 months later, he was in exile, his property seized by Hitler's new regime. Germany's loss, America's gain.
Report of statement by Hermann Göring to members of the foreign press on March the 25th, 1933. There was no one in Germany who had had even a fingernail cut off. He didn't deny that several thousand communist functionaries had been arrested, but they were treated exactly the same as other prisoners. There had also been cases where Jews had been arrested and beaten. The minister explained.
The government and I will never tolerate that someone is persecuted just because he is Jewish.
Deutsche Allgemeine Zeitung, newspaper, March the 26th, 1933.
Diary, March the 31st, 1933. On the radio, Göring has announced the boycott of the Jews. It is scheduled for tomorrow. Bella Fromm.
At each entrance stood 2 or 3 uniformed SA soldiers, who weren't aggressive, but merely reminded those shopping that this was a Jewish business. Christopher Isherwood.
Diary, Leipzig, April the 1st, 1933. When entering the store, the SA man says in a polite, disciplined tone, "Jewish business." We, just as polite and disciplined. "Thank you, we know." Eric Ebermann, author.
Diary, Wrocław, Saturday, April the 1st, 1933. In all Jewish shops, one sees the windows painted with white letters about 50 to 80 centimeters high. Jew. Glued next to them, or in the process of being stuck on, are little red slips of paper. Germans do not buy from Jews. Walter Tausk, German of Jewish descent, murdered 1940.
A certain murmur of disapproval, suppressed but audible, ran through the country. The Nazis realized that the step they had just taken was too large. And after April the 1st, they canceled some of the measures, but not without first allowing their full force to be felt. Sebastian Hafner, author, Memoirs.
Not January the 30th, the day of the seizure of power, not the day of the gathering in Potsdam, March the 23rd, 1933, but April the 1st of this year is the great turning point. It was the clear, unmistakable demonstration that the rule of law was over. The rule of law was replaced by naked tyranny. Paul Ronge, lawyer, Königsberg.
Diary, April the 1st, 1933. Difficult times. Adolf Hitler will master them. May he succeed. Henriette Schneider, Elk, East Prussia.
In Berlin, wie in anderen Universitätsstädten Deutschlands,
A nationwide campaign is directed at the non-German spirit, that is to say Jews and other supposedly hostile elements. On May the 10th, 1933, undesirable books are publicly burnt on Berlin's Opernplatz, opposite the Friedrich Wilhelm University.
Reichsminister Dr. Goebbels spricht zur Jugend.
Meine Kommilitonen, deutsche Männer und Frauen, das Zeitalter eines überspitzten jüdischen Intellektualismus ist nun zu Ende. Und der Durchbruch der deutschen Revolution hat auf dem deutschen Weg wieder die Gasse freigemacht. Und der kommende deutsche Mensch wird nicht nur ein Mensch des Buches, sondern auch ein Mensch des Charakters sein.
Among the authors whose works are thrown onto a large pyre by Berlin students are the German Jews Theodor Wolff and Emil Ludwig, but also the atheists Karl Marx and Karl Kautsky, along with Sigmund Freud and Erich Maria Remarque, Kurt Tucholsky, Karl von Ossietzky and Erich Kästner.
In 1933, my books were burnt with somber, solemn pomp by a certain Mr. Goebbels in Berlin. He triumphantly called out the names of 24 German writers who were to be symbolically eliminated forever. I was the only one of the 24 who had come in person to witness this theatrical impudence. I stood in front of the university, wedged in among students in SA uniform, the pride of the nation, watching our books fly into the twitching flames and listening to the cunning little liars' schmaltzy tirades. Erich Kästner, author.
It is a strange thought that the essence of a single man can redirect and convert an entire society like a magnet directed at a pile of pieces of metal. Karen Blixen, Danish writer.
Anyone who did not fight against the Hitler state effectively served it. Esther, Countess of Schwerin, East Prussian landowner.
I, as a natural coward and endowed with an excruciating imagination, kept my mouth shut. Marie-Louise Kaschnitz, writer, notes.
People cling to life. You could certainly go along with it, but you could also keep a low profile and become invisible. Orda Schäfer, writer.
Letter from prison, June the 7th, 1933. You know that imprisonment doesn't depress me at all. What could I really do outside at the moment? Shrug off the sad looks of the workers with a humiliated heart and sagging shoulders, and tell them that I cannot change it either? It's better to be outwardly unfree, and inwardly face the future with a proud soul. Julius Leber, SPD member of the Reichstag.
The first improvised concentration camps are run by the SA and are then taken over by Himmler's SS, thus creating the SS state.
There were concentration camps in Germany at the time, including one in Oranienburg. It's true that Hermann Göring set up the first when he was head of the Prussian police. They weren't intended for Jews, however, but for the communist enemies of the state. Emmy Göring, née Sonnemann, actress.
When Himmler requested that I join the active SS, the guard troops of a concentration camp, I had not thought about concentration camps. The term was too strange for me. I had no concept of what it was. Rudolf Höss, member of the SS.
People abroad often ignored the fact that concentration camps had first been set up for Germans opposed to the Nazis, many thousands of whom died there before any foreign countries were occupied. Willy Brandt, German-Norwegian refugee in exile in Sweden.
National Socialism is nothing new. Just the faithful, old, supportive, noble German manner, which has been buried for years and has been brought back to life by our Führer. Maria Engelhardt, NSDAP member, Duisburg.
That's why I want to pray to God on my knees every day, that Hitler, who we need so much today, stays healthy for many years. Wilhelm Mayr, NSDAP member, Kaiserslautern.
Sooner or later, that was our firm will. The party political state was to be destroyed. A nation ruled by 35 parties had to one day collapse as a result of the friction between the interest groups. Gerhard Ulein, NSDAP member, Tilsit, East Prussia.
Diary, June the 25th, 1933. The Stahlhelm organization is subordinated to the NSDAP. The German National Party office is occupied. The German nationalist combat groups and numerous associations have been dissolved. The Christian workers' trade unions have been called enemies of the state and dissolved. A state commissioner has been appointed for the Protestant church. A number of leading social democrats have been placed in protective custody, among them former Reichstag President Löbe. Kurt F. Rosenberg, German Jewish lawyer, Hamburg.
On June the 22nd, 1933, the NSDAP Reich Interior Minister, Wilhelm Frick, declares the Social Democratic Party a subversive party and an enemy of the people, which results in its dissolution. With the arrest of 2,000 officials by the Bavarian political police led by Himmler, the end of June sees the demise of the Catholic Bavarian People's Party, which is dissolved on July the 4th. One day later, the Centre Party, the last remaining political party besides the NSDAP, is banned. On June the 14th, 1933, the law against the formation of new parties ensures that the NSDAP remains the only authorized political party in Germany.
Diary, Paris, July the 6th, 1933, Thursday. To guard a list from where Countess Kaiserling left for Germany. Her husband Hermann spoke very interestingly about the Nazis and Hitler. Hitler, whom he studied carefully, is somebody who seeks death and thus embodies a fundamental characteristic of the German people. Harry Graf Kessler.
Pageant in Schwelm in May 1939. The Germans are still daring enough to put on a parody of the Führer.
As long as the jokes were good, he once said, that meant that the man was still popular. Wilhelm Krause, personal assistant to Hitler.
He had such a natural sense of humor and was full of genuine happiness and warmth in those years. Emmy Göring.
As an artist, I was able to get to know him privately. Good-natured, with a sense of fun, receptive to harmless jokes from others, himself humorous, and with a lot of self-irony. Albert Speer, the Kranzberg Protocol.
Anyone who says afterwards that Hitler had no sense of humor simply didn't know him. Hitler had wit and a sense of humor and could laugh out loud. Hartmann Lauterbacher, provincial NSDAP leader.
Hitler's laughter always had a touch of scorn and sarcasm. It revealed traces of past disappointments and suppressed ambitions. Paul Otto Schmidt, interpreter for Adolf Hitler.
During the party convention, I had seen him laugh heartily at least a dozen times. He would throw back his head so that a lock of hair fell over his left temple down over his eye. Still laughing, he would shake it out of his face with a jerk of his head, or he would push it back with his hand. William Shirer, U.S. newspaper correspondent to Berlin.
Diary, Wednesday, August the 30th, 1933. In the evening, I listened to Hitler's magnificent reception in Nuremberg. Speeches, fanfares, singing, all broadcast perfectly. How must this simple musketeer of the World War feel now? He remains the simple man of the people. Henriette Schneider.
The first Nazi rally film, Victory of Faith, is produced by the director Leni Riefenstahl on just a small budget.
When I watched the film at the cinema, I was anything but happy. What was happening on the screen for me was just an incomplete patchwork, not a film. But it seemed to please the audience, perhaps because it was more interesting than the usual newsreels. I certainly did not watch it a second time. Hitler and the party bigwigs were also thrilled by this film, that only runs for an hour. Leni Riefenstahl, director and actress.
What was new in Nazi Germany was that Hitler's fascism used all the possible forms of a reign of terror and human liquidation with utter ruthlessness, increasing technical perfection, and German thoroughness. For the first time, the politically uniform mass media of a whole country, including the new media, radio, and sound film, were unashamedly used to serve a murderous, anti-communist witch hunt. Erich Honecker, Communist Party official in the Saarland, from my life.
Whether the Germans are a mystical people is debatable. Either way, you can't deny that they are currently undergoing a phase of messianism. Besides, there is also a kind of cultish tendency towards symbolism, undoubtedly a rather degenerate form of mysticism. Flags, badges, uniforms, dueling scars, Führer, Wagner, swastika, golden braids, all of these are symbols. Antoni Graf-Sobański, Polish writer and essayist.
Campaigning in a working-class district in Hamburg-Altona, the NSDAP are courting the workers in particular. On November the 12th, 1933, Hitler calls new elections for the Reichstag. Only candidates from one single list are admitted, which is advertised with the slogan, "With Hitler against the armaments madness." The new Reichstag has 661 members and no women or Jews. Only 22 members are not from the NSDAP.
Up until 1934, the Communist and Social Democratic parties were still a power. On November the 12th, 1933, on just one street, Rheinische Straße in Dortmund, 2,000 voted no. Hitler had linked this Reichstag election with a referendum on the withdrawal from the League of Nations. Anyone who came to the polling stations received a yes pin, which was intended to exert psychological pressure on the voters. Nevertheless, more than 2 million Germans didn't take part in the election, and over 3 million voted no. Erich Honecker.
The best-selling books in Germany at the time of National Socialism were 5th place, Alfred Rosenberg, The Myth of the 20th Century, an assessment of the spiritual and intellectual confrontation of our time, 335,000 copies. 4th place, Philip Buhler, The Fight for Germany, a reader for German youth, 950,000 copies. 3rd place, the Cigarette Card album Germany Awakens, Development, Struggle and Victory of the NSDAP, 1,175,000 copies. 2nd place, I'm Still Laughing About It, Soldiers Tell Funny Stories, 2,600,000 copies. 1st place, Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf, 12,450,000 copies. At the Nuremberg Victory Rally in early September 1933, SA Chief of Staff Ernst Röhm is the most prominent party leader after Hitler and clearly his right-hand man. In public, Röhm shows his loyalty to Hitler. Privately, however, he criticizes him severely for his policy on the German army. Thanks to his instinct for power, Hitler is willing to believe the rumors, spread by opponents of the powerful head of the SA, that the leaders of the SA, with its 4 million members, are planning a coup.
Perfect Caesarism is dictatorship. Not dictatorship by a party, but by one man who is against all parties, especially his own. Every revolutionary movement achieves victory with the vanguard of Praetorian guards, who are then no longer needed and are merely dangerous. Oswald Spengler, nationalist German historical philosopher.
During the first half of 1934, I had repeated meetings with Hitler regarding the financing of the SA. Röhm took regular part in the talks. Although the discussions between Hitler and Röhm were carried out as between old comrades, you could detect tension in the background. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, Minister of Finance.
Diary, Berlin, June the 24th, 1934. Politically, it stinks. Nobody knows why exactly. A power struggle is impending between the SA and the SS. Erich Ebermeier.
When Dietrich Eckart died in 1923, just 4 men were left who addressed Hitler with the familiar Du form: Esser, Weber, Streicher and Röhm. Albert Speer, Memoirs.
The differences of opinion between Röhm and Hitler, especially concerning the issue of the German army, escalate. Before the SA leadership, Röhm finally calls for the German army to be included in his command.
According to Hitler, Röhm was an anarchist who wanted power at any price. Neither the ideals of the National Socialists nor the thought of a new system of government determined his actions, but only the desire to get control of the German army. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
The so-called Röhm Revolt, the Night of the Long Knives, was really an act by Goebbels and Göring to get rid of uncomfortable accessories and dangerous rivals. Theophil Wurm, Archbishop of the Evangelical Church in Württemberg.
Diary, Sunday, July the 1st, 1934. Mutiny of the SA leaders in Munich, with Röhm at its head. Hitler himself helped arrest the gang and had them shot. Henrietta Schneider.
Bit by bit, the news of what was happening trickled through until late that evening a full official account was issued. Ernst Röhm, said the communiqué, and some of his fellow stormtroop leaders had been caught plotting a putsch to seize power. Hitler and Göring had uncovered the plot and crushed it. Sefton Delmer, correspondent of the Daily Express in Berlin.
The violence of the Night of the Long Knives is carried out by the SS on orders from Hitler and Göring. The Lieutenant General of the SS, Sepp Dietrich, receives weapons from the German army for his bodyguard unit, Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, to carry out a secret and very important assignment for the Führer.
June the 30th, 1934. Prison Munich Stadelheim. There were terrible hours once I arrived in the office. Sepp Dietrich and Prince Waldeck came into my room in SS uniform and said they had orders to shoot the SA leadership at once. The Führer had sent him a list of 110 SA leaders who were suspects. I said this was absolutely out of the question. Dietrich called Hess and reported my refusal to him. Then he gave me the phone and said, "The Führer wants to talk to you."
You refuse to obey my order? I will eradicate these boys with rods and sticks.
Suddenly, Hess came on the phone. I pointed out to Hess that most of the SA leaders did not give the impression of having been hauled away from an armed putsch attempt. The firing squads informed me that it was already dark, and that would make it very difficult to shoot. I sat and waited and smoked. Finally, the phone rang. Hess told me the main culprits are to be shot. Then I asked him, which ones? I had the list in my hand and heard him say 19 names. Röhm was not on the list. Hans Frank, Bavarian Minister of Justice.
On July the 2nd, Hitler announces the official end of the purge in which between 150 and 200 people were shot.
Röhm was one of the last victims. He was shot on July the 2nd, 1934. Hans Frank.
Diary, July the 13th, 1934. In the evening, a major speech by Hitler. To Germany and foreign countries, he justified his actions of June the 30th against the traitors. We are proud of our Führer. May God preserve him. Henrietta Schneider.
Mutiny is broken by means of the same inviolable principles. If someone accuses me of not having brought in the ordinary courts for judgment, I can only say that at this hour I was responsible for the fate of the German nation, and thus the German people's supreme judge.
To crush the alleged revolt by Röhm, Adolf Hitler uses the services of the SS, whose leaders have already brought the police almost entirely under their command. The SS, which was formerly still affiliated with the SA, is rewarded for its murderous service. On July the 20th, 1934, Hitler decrees,
"In view of the great services of the SS, particularly in connection with the occurrences of June the 30th, 1934, I hereby promote them to a self-contained organization within the NSDAP." Adolf Hitler.
With that, Hitler has forged the decisive weapon of his state. The SA becomes a kind of folklore club for the NSDAP.
Hitler swore that only 77 people had been executed. It had been unavoidable that some were shot by accident. Like a certain Willy Schmidt in Munich, for example, the SS were in a hurry to shoot the first Willy Schmidt they could find, without court proceedings. You have to consider how many Willy Schmidts there were in Munich. Friedlin Wagner at boarding school.